Hey, Allison.
Hi, Justin. We've done 119, I
Something
think,
like that, yeah.
episodes of the In Sickness podcast, but never in the same room.
Never in the same room, never with an audience. So
Right.
This is very new. This is probably the largest.
Yeah. Never without the option to edit in the middle.
Right.
Right.
We'll be fine.
We'll be fine.
So yeah, thanks everybody for joining us here today. So for those who don't know me or Allison, myself, I'm Justin Bajema. I have been a caregiver to my wife, Sarah. She's doing quite well now, but for a good 10 years plus, she has gone through a lot with fibromyalgia, with ME/CFS, with POTS. There was a 3.5 year period in the middle there where she was basically bedbound. I was trying to work full time through all of that. It's been a journey. So that's a little bit about me. I flew in from Washington State to be here yesterday, and it's been a really great experience to just see everyone that's here, to meet some faces that I've only interacted with online, and so that's me. What about you?
So I'm Allison Breininger, and I am a caregiver for my husband, Sean, who is here today. Well enough to be here today, which is great. Yes, it's a big deal. I've been his caregiver for 14 years. He has a rare genetic disease called Fanconi anemia, which causes bone marrow failure and then also cancer at a rate of around 700 times that of the rest of us. So in these 14 years since his diagnosis, he's had a bone marrow transplant. He had tongue cancer and had part of his tongue removed. Bladder cancer, had his bladder removed. Throat cancer twice, esophageal cancer, gum cancer 5-6 times, about 200 skin cancers. Sometimes we lose. There's probably some I forgot. But you get the point that it's been intense. So I was sort of thrust into being his caregiver in my early 30s with no medical knowledge. And all of this that you're seeing here today, the podcast, the negative space, and a lot of this CaregiverCON have come from that experience. So, yeah.
Great. So as far as how did we meet, how did I end up on this stage in front of you all? So years ago, in the middle of my caregiving journey, it's a lot. I was finally reached a point where I was looking for support, trying to find voices that resonated with me to try to understand what I was going through. It seemed like from a spousal perspective, much of what was out there was for people much older who were caring for an aging partner, things like that, or kids caring for an aging parent. And so I was trying to find stuff, and I came across an article written by Allison, and it was about, I think you had a meeting or something, you had to leave Sean at home, and something happened while you were gone. And that was such a experience that I could relate to. My wife was sick, she was spending most of her time in bed, and I had to leave and go to work during the day, and that was always really stressful and felt strange and odd, and I read it and I felt like someone else understood the situation I was in. And so we connected on Instagram, and built up a friendship, and after a bit, I kind of wanted a opportunity to just talk to someone who understood being a caregiver, just about being a caregiver, just to have some more in-depth conversations. And so I pitched, hey, let's do 6 episodes of a podcast. Nothing, no commitment beyond that. And we gave it a shot and have kept going. So, yeah.
I remember that moment. I can picture, I was in the middle of cooking dinner, and then ding, and here's Justin, and he's like, what if we did a podcast? And I was like, sure. And then you're like, just 6 episodes.
Right.
And I think, tell me, in the beginning, in that moment, did you know it was going to be more, and you knew that I would say no if it was bigger? Or were you really just thinking 6?
I wanted it to be more.
Yeah.
And understanding that your life is busy, life as a caregiver is busy, wanted to at least have something.
Yep.
And so it was hey, let's do 6, hoping that, okay, this is going well, let's just keep the train moving.
Yeah. And in the beginning we thought, maybe we can think of 6 topics.
Right.
maybe. And now we're at 119, and our queue of all the other topics is so long because there's a lot to talk about when
There
it comes
is,
to this,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and so it's just an example of how you can really find strong community with other caregivers. You know, so often there are people in your life, friends, family, and yes, they're there to support you, and yes, they're there to listen to you, but they don't necessarily know what life is like day in and day out for you. They can't necessarily relate to that. And so when you can just be blunt and honest with someone who is in a similar state, like it's very freeing and just can feel supportive in a way that you can't get elsewhere.
And I think as caregivers, because we're so often isolated and we're in our homes and we can't get out that much,
Yep.
that social media
Exactly.
was a way. Like I said, we had that conversation about podcasts while I was cooking dinner, right? Because it's not the kind of thing where you can get out much and you can connect, but social media helped us
Exactly, yeah.
to connect in that way.
Right.
Yeah.
And then since, as far as community with caregivers, since starting the podcast, we have a support group that goes along with it that you lead. And I know that there is a community that has developed there amongst people who show up for those sessions and really have built a strong community amongst themselves. And that's something that I never could have envisioned when we started the thing. I really started it because I wanted to have these conversations, and I figured, well, maybe someone would want to also listen in. But yeah, it's really been amazing to see that effect of it just continuing to move and help other people along the way. Yeah.
We have a lot of our support group groupies are here today, both in person, yes, woohoo, in person and also watching virtually. And so a cool thing about the support groups, I'll just do a quick little plug, is that we do them in connection to the podcast. And so it's almost like a book club. So it's like you listen to the podcast and then it's like, oh, I want to talk to somebody about that. So then you get to come the next week to the support group and have that conversation around that topic. So if there's a topic that you're like, oh, I really want to be there for that, you can. Or if it's like, I did not like that topic, or I don't have pets, or I don't want to whatever the topic was, you can avoid that one. But that's been a really beautiful way for people to connect as well. And we have there, because it's virtual, we have people from Australia. Ella, I think, is watching. Hi, Ella, from Australia. And, England and Canada and all over. And so it's just accessible for caregivers in that way.
Yeah, so just, it was great this morning to hear about, from Jessica, the puzzle pieces and the people around your life that can help support you. And so we just kind of wanted to get into the specifics of the connections between caregivers and what that can mean. And we're all here, and I hope that, people were out there talking prior to this, and I hope that, you're making connections and can continue those connections. And I think we did ask some people if they have connected with other caregivers prior to this, right?
Yeah. So we did some polls in Whova, if you were in the Whova app. There were some questions that we asked this week, and we had some people answer our polls. So one of them was, where have you connected with fellow caregivers? And the top answer was support groups, then social media, and then events like CaregiverCon. So that's sort of what we heard from participants when we polled you.
Yeah, and I think the social media one is interesting to me because in, 2025? Social media is a real dumpster fire in a lot of ways. And yet, some of my strongest connections with caregivers have been made there and in other areas of other hobbies that I'm in. Like, there are great people there. And so it is great to see that it still can be a good thing when so often now it's just kind of not that as much. So, and I see the way it allows caregivers who are, as you mentioned, isolated at home to make connections. Geography is not an issue, all of that. Yeah.
I mean, what Jessica showed earlier in her presentation, right? She and I met because she found
Same thing.
Found the same way, and then reached out on Instagram, right? And so again, the reason that she's in this room today is because of social media. So I guess there's some good things. So there's an impact, right, of having, when Jessica earlier talked about the different puzzle pieces, that, you might be like, well, my brother doesn't show up, or this person doesn't show up for me. But often it is these caregivers, the people who get it, who can be those puzzle pieces. And so you said earlier you didn't really have much of a caregiver community. You went kind of searching for something. What has been the impact for you of finding a caregiver community?
Yeah, initially, I was years into caregiving, it wasn't something I was talking about much. I'm not someone who prior to that talked about, the hard things that were going on in my life so much, but you need an outlet for all of the feelings you're having inside. And my wife wasn't necessarily always able to be a sounding board for what I'm feeling just because of her energy-wise. And there's always that difficult dynamic when you are going through, how this caregiving situation is so difficult and challenging on you when they're the reason you're in the caregiving situation. And so that's not always the right place, or it doesn't feel like the right place, or it's just a difficult spot to be in. And we talk about the ring theory a lot, which is, if you guys don't know, think of like a bullseye, and the person that is at the center is the person who is ill or the person who is receiving care, and we're kind of like one ring out, and then, maybe your siblings or your parents are the next ring, and you got friends, and it just kind of goes out to your cousins and your neighbors and all of that. And so the idea is that you care in and you support inward to circles and you dump out. And so, as my wife's in the center of the circle, finding someone further out to be able to really get into how I'm feeling about all this. So having those connections, being able to kind of release all of that stuff that had been rolling around in my head for years was just really therapeutic and really helpful to start to understand what I was going through. I think the ability to talk about it, just practicing actually talking about the stuff, helps in other areas. So it's when you're with your friends or family, it's easier to explain what's going on in your life because you have actually said it out loud to someone else before.
And since you brought up the ring theory, I think that, like Jess and her puzzle pieces, too often we think, okay, like if Sean's in the middle and then there's me, well, then the next people should be my closest people. But often just because, genetically they're the closest people, or maybe geographically they're the closest people, they don't end up being the people who are like your people as you go through this, right? So I don't know what ring, like this random guy from Instagram who reached out to me who lives on the other side of the country would be, right?
Right.
But you're one of my closest people. And so I think that when we think about where do we find community and where do we find these puzzle pieces, that's so important that, like Jess talked about, we can go through the pain of, well, I'm really disappointed and frustrated and sad and resentful that ring 3, 4, 5, 6 are maybe not showing up for me the way I thought they might. But look, I got this guy in ring 74 who's like really become an important part of my life. And I think that that's what these caregivers and what we have here today can really do, is that we find these people who get it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's I think, when I'll speak to the impact that it's had on me, it's having people who get it.
Right.
Because the people who were friends from the before days, right? We were for a while on a trajectory together, and then my life went, and then they kept going. And so when I'm like, "How was your weekend?" their answer is very different than mine, right? And so they don't get it. And then if they say, "Well, then how was yours?" and then sometimes I just start talking, and pretty soon they go pale or they pass out because I'm talking about medical things, and I forget that this isn't everybody's life. And so being able to have those conversations with people who get it.
Right.
It's huge.
Yeah, and I mean, seeing your peers going off in a different direction can be a really hard thing in so many ways, and to kind of have a set of peers that it's horrible and terrible in all of the ways that you're all going in the same direction, but you're going in the same direction together, and the situation that brought you all there is horrible, but to know that there are people who are experiencing what you're experiencing, and you are not alone in your experiences, and you can look to someone and they're right there with you, and that can make just the feeling of not being alone, the feeling of being less isolated. I think I felt very, very isolated prior to all of this, and yeah, no longer, and that has made a huge difference in my life.
And I think back to with Jess saying, "I am not alone" this morning, right? So we think about that, but that a different way of being not alone is realizing, like, there's 63 million of us caregivers in the United States, right? So not just I'm not alone in my situation, but I'm not alone in this caregiving thing.
Right.
And so my favorite thing when we do our Zoom support groups or anything else like that, is that someone puts something out there, they say something, it's really vulnerable, and I think they're ready for everyone to like log off and, in fear, but instead everybody nods. And then the speaker's like, oh, what? You get it? Or everyone in the chat is saying, yes, yes, you know what I mean? And they realize, oh, and again, none of us want to be going through it, and we wish that people didn't understand it. But if we are going through it, at least there's somebody else out there who gets it, and we're not the only one.
Right. There's something to hearing someone else say something out loud that you've only thought in your head and felt terrible that you think that in your head maybe, and it just feels wrong, and you're the only one certainly who has these thoughts, and then someone else just like says the thing and you're like, okay, wow. Other people feel this way, and there's not something wrong with me because I'm struggling to care for my spouse, and that's like, it should be just this noble thing that I do. But I think that's the other thing when I went looking for caregiving voices is what struck me a lot about your writing and your stuff on Instagram is it was just very open and honest about just the realities that this is just a hard life. And I think that it gets painted in a brighter light than it is as this thing that we just are supposed to do and supposed to feel blessed that we are able to care for, whether it's a parent or a child or a partner. And I think society feels like just act that way, and they get uncomfortable when they hear us talk about, well, yes, it's hard, and I struggle with staying in it. Yeah, and I think part of that is I think that they don't want to think about the fact that they're going to need a caregiver, that they're going to need to care for someone else. Like, we're all going to end up on one side of the coin at some point in our lives.
And that's why it's helpful to talk to people who are already in it. Because they're not uncomfortable by what we say, because they're already in the middle of it. Totally. So we did a poll about this one on Whova as well. We said, if you have a community of other caregivers, what has the impact been on you? And when we boiled it down, it really turned into feeling understood and feeling less isolated, is what you all said, is the benefits.
Right.
So you said a minute ago that I was kind of real. The word negative is even in my thing.
I've never
so
thought about
let's
it that
talk
way.
about the potential downsides.
Right, yes.
Let's let Allison bring it down.
Yeah, let's do it.
Are there, there's good things about having caregivers as friends in this community. What are the potential downsides?
Yes, so on the one hand, caregivers have a lot going on in their lives. They're very busy a lot of time. They don't have a lot of energy. So while you may have this great friendship with someone, it may not be someone who's always available to connect. They may be, in the middle of a hospital stay and, sleeping in a chair, and just, they have so much going on in their own life that understandably they don't have the capacity to take on what's going on in your life. And it's challenging then, because you want to respect that, but you need your support. And I think that's where having a group of caregivers, not just one person, hopefully you're not all in the thick of it at the same time, and that can kind of help. But it's probably difficult too to be the one that is in the hospital, unavailable to support your friend because you just don't have the capacity, and to know that they need that support and to not be able to provide it.
Yes, it is. Yes, it's very hard. I can speak to that. Yeah, for sure. Well, you and I had a really honest conversation recently on the podcast because, when we started this, we were both super in the thick of it.
Right.
And you're in a really different position now. And on that episode, you even said that you don't even consider yourself a caregiver at this moment. And so I shared in that episode and that it feels a little challenging in a way with our friendship, because that was the thing. And so, in the beginning of every podcast, we say, and how are you? And how have you been the last couple weeks? And how have you? And my answer was like, terrible, this thing, like week after week after week. And you were like, I'm good, and I'm going on a trip, and I'm planning this, and I'm doing that. And it was just sort of this, I think the check-ins that happened really made it clear for me, like, oh man, like I am still deeply in this, probably more so than ever, and you're like living your best life. And so that was like a hard moment because it was unlike a typical friendship, it was sort of like there's a little bit of this divide that is now happening. And so I think that's a tricky thing that can happen when you're friends with caregivers.
Right, and that's certainly something, as someone who is talking to other caregivers, some of whom are caring for their partner with very similar conditions, and things have taken a turn for my wife and I, and we're doing well, and that doesn't mean that that's going to be the future for everybody else. And so it's kind of this, I don't want to talk that up too much, because I know that that's not guaranteed for everybody. And so it is, and I don't want to talk to you and just be like, everything's great, when I know that, you had a horrible last month and it has been really challenging. So there is that. And I think the other side of a similar thing is you can see your potential future the other way, to where if you are friends with someone and your partner has cancer, their partner has cancer, and you see they are nearing the end, and you envision that is your future, like that is what may lie ahead for you, and it's understandable that may not be something that you can face and be present for with them. And that can be another hard thing, because all of our lives as caregivers, like, there's real stuff, there is grief, there's pain, there's all of that.
And we have lots of caregivers that it's happened to that are part of our support group and whatnot, who their person passes away. And then suddenly they're like, these were my people. The support group people were my people. This was my podcast. These were my go-tos. And now they're certainly still welcome to all of those things, but they have said, I'm not in that group anymore. And now I didn't just lose my person, but I also lost my support. Like, I don't feel like I fit in that way. And so, there's beauty in these friendships, and there's also some complications that can come up as well.
Right. So as with, the other things we've been talking about here, we also polled people on, what downsides they've experienced. And it echoes some of what we said. Not being able to help, certainly, it's again, like, when you're a caregiver and you have, your person has some scans coming up, right? The people that you hear the most from, like the supporting messages that, like, hey, I'm thinking about you as you're going into this, and the day after, I know that yesterday was a really challenging day and you're probably exhausted and you still have to care for your person. Like, it's caregivers. They're the people that are showing up in your comments, in your texts, encouraging you. And it's just, they also don't always have the capacity. And it's just that tension, and it's the frustration too of, okay, these people, they're doing this in spite of everything that's going on, and that sometimes makes you think about all the people in your life who aren't, their life seems to be going great, and they're just blissfully ignorant of your pain and your experience.
Or sometimes as caregivers, I see it's the caregivers who want to, like, buy a caregiver gift box for somebody else or show up for somebody else because they're the ones who get it, right? And it's like, no, you guys rest. But it's like, when they get it, they're the ones who want to show up and help. But so then it can feel hard as a caregiver when you're in it and you're like, oh, I want to be making them that soup or whatever, but I can't because I'm in it, right?
Yeah, and certainly in my own experience, going through something difficult, going through this caregiving journey with my wife, like, it has changed how I see people in the world around me. Like, I'm more attuned to, there are more people going through these challenges that you don't know what's going on in their homes, or what they're struggling with day in and day out. And so you notice, or for me, I pick up on that sooner and realize, like, oh yeah, they've got this going on, and you're so much more aware of it. And maybe want to do something, but you have to balance your own capacity in that.
One of the things that you all said in the poll is that one potential downside is that caregiving is all you talk about in that friendship. Which, I mean, maybe it's okay because you have other things. I have a good friend who might be watching right now. She's one of our groupies as well, and she and I text all the time, and she'll say things like, do you want to talk about the fact that you had to call 911 in an ambulance yesterday for your husband, or would you rather talk about plants? because either is fine. And then I'll say, plants, please, right? But because she gets that, right, she'll give that option. Or
Right.
like, we were in the hospital the other day and she's like, let's talk about what color sweatshirt you're going to buy with the money I just Venmo'd you, like, and so sometimes it's great because she gets it so much. Shout out to you, Sarah, if you're watching. She gets it so much that she's like, we are actually not going to talk about caregiving right now. We're going to talk about the opposite thing. And that's beautiful too.
Right.
Because other people might be like, what? I thought Allison was like in a crisis and she's actually talking about plants. Like, well, that doesn't make sense. But the caregivers get it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of you on the poll said none. There are no downsides to being friends with caregivers. Many of you said that. So I'm glad that has been your experience. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I just want to really encourage everybody to take advantage of being physically in the same space with so many other caregivers. And I hope that you've had a chance to get to know some more, to talk to people, and I hope that you can maintain those connections out of here, because they can make such a big difference in this journey that we're all on. And I just hope that, in that way, you can all hopefully find more support in your life and more understanding, because we all deserve and need that.
Absolutely. And I think, anybody who's hung around me knows that I don't like bright-siding things.
Right.
I don't like the silver lining and the, everything happens for a reason. And I will say that if my husband had not gotten this diagnosis, I wouldn't know 95% of the people in this room. I wouldn't be sitting here. We would have never met.
No.
Jess and I would have never met, like most of you. And so it's this sort of unexpected gift. And sometimes you hear it's like the club you never wanted to be part of kind of thing. But there is some truth to that, if I have to go through this really hard thing, I am grateful that I have gotten a chance to meet these really incredible, interesting people from all across the world, really, and build these relationships, and to have them be my puzzle pieces, right? To say it's way beyond my nuclear family or anything like that, but it's really beyond and all of these other people. So that's a benefit.
Good.
Yeah. A couple ways you can stay connected. One is that we're having a happy hour afterwards, so stay and chat. The Whova app, you can use that to chat with each other after the event. So if you downloaded it, you can be doing that. And then if you haven't visited the Negative Space Table, you can do that and sign up for our support groups, because like I said, you can see some of these are the coolest people here. And it's so that's just another way that you can stay connected. And as well, Jax has in-person and virtual support groups as well. So we do, because it's live and we don't usually get to do this.
Right.
We want to open it up to see if there's any questions. This will be part of the recorded episode, so keep that in mind. But any questions either for us individually about any of our stuff or about, oh man, this is my daughter.
Hi, Mama.
Hi, Maya.
I don't quite appreciate that. But so I would say that one of my questions is for caregivers that may be considered non-conventional, for things like mothers, or for, I would even say people who support caregivers. I think that one of the most interesting things has been watching you try and balance what's happening. For me personally, the other day I had an issue with my medications, and so trying to go and figure out how to get what I needed while also balancing, my parents are going through the roughest time they've had in a while, while also trying to balance, just the normal things the things that are considered typical in a family. But I think that oftentimes what's forgotten is that you are a double caregiver, is because you have me and you have my father, and she has my grandma, and my dog. But I just think that it's such an interesting thing, because although it's considered typical and it is considered something that you are supposed to do. You're supposed to be an amazing mother, which you are. You're supposed to take care of your husband, and you're supposed to be able to smile through all of that. And I just think that it's good to remember that this is not actually normal, and that this is an abnormal amount of stress that you are under, that you continue with. We met at like Devani's Pizza the other day, right down there, and you were just all smile. I was like, this is incredible that like my dad is literally in the hospital right now. I'm going through like these things with myself, and I can still come to my mama for counsel and for advice and for, a peace of mind, and that you just have this like light and incredible aura around you, which I'm sure people in this room can, tell. And I just think that that's incredible. And that's just like, for Justin, you too. It's like when I saw you in Seattle, first of all, I really liked hearing about your llamas.
Good.
But he used to have llamas. But I just remember thinking that, wow, like this is like this incredible human being who is just put under so much chronic stress, more than the average human being. And it's just amazing to kind of like be in the presence of this, and that you don't always have to be positive, and that, even when you have these horrible moments, I want you to know that you can pour outward out of the target circle, and that, you have these rings of people that are here for you, even though you are always so positive. And so that's...
Isn't she the best?
Yeah.
She's the best. I don't know that there was a question in there, but I will. But I think it's such a good, thank you, Maya. It's such a good reminder that when people hear that I'm a caregiver, they think of, oh, it's Sean. She's caring for Sean. He's the one who's always in the hospital. He's the one, whatever. But yes, I have a 19-year-old, right? I have an aunt who lives in town who, I'm the secondary caregiver for her, but still, like, I do things for her. My parents are in great health, right? Yes. Woo! But, there's that. So I think that that's true, that we think often about the one person and we don't pay attention to all the other humans and animals, right, that we have in our lives that we care for. And so thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. So I've been caregiver for my adult parents, my developmentally disabled brother, and then my two children that are now adults with significant health issues. And we, as society, we talk about your aging parents. You talk about where you've got your own kids, and you're a sandwich generation person. That's me, right? But the group that doesn't get talked about are the grandparents that are raising their grandkids. And that would also be me, where I've raised 3 of my grandkids. So what kind of support is out there for grandparents that may be overlooked and not getting the support that they need because they're raising their grandkids?
Great question.
Yeah,
And
that is a
thank
good
you
question.
for all that you've done for all the people in your circle. I don't, and if there's any, because I don't know if any of our vendors or exhibitors are in here today, but are there other people? I don't have a fabulous answer just for that specific group, although I think that, at the Negative Space, we're trying to shine light on all the different kinds of caregivers, and so that's a good reminder to me that of like the grandparents too. Like that's another one that we often are overlooked, because caregivers in general, that's such a hard thing, is that people don't see us. But then when you're unseen within the unseen, right? Like, look, it's a caregiver conference, but nobody's talking about grandparents, right? And so I'm sorry that you're in an unseen within an unseen category. Is there anybody in the room that has any good resources for grandparent caregiving? Yeah.
So I would just search Lutheran Social Services Grandparent Program, and I think that website would come up. And I think they may also have support groups.
Great, thank you. Other questions for us or comments? Yeah, Andrea.
Hi, I'm Andrea. My question is more so for Justin,
Okay.
because of overlap with illness groups. And it's probably too big of a question, but maybe like in the queue for future episodes of like a timeline of your caregiver journey and like kind of what things were like in the seasons where things were really hard and like the progression of things getting better and like more in depth of like the timeline of those things.
Yeah, no, that would be interesting because it certainly, I mean, it started off with she had back pain and she was getting like a steroid injection in her back or something. And this was maybe like in November of a year. I don't know what year it was. And she got this horrible migraine, and we were like in the ER days before Christmas, and that migraine just stuck around for years, and it was just then part of this slow decline. It wasn't this unexpected diagnosis that like suddenly, you know, she has a condition and we need to like ramp up, and suddenly I'm thrown into feeling like a caregiver and all that. It was just very, very gradual. And then there was a time she was like, she sat through like 3 green lights. She was driving home from an appointment and she's like, I can't drive anymore. And so that was more for me to take on. Yeah. And it certainly, she was able to move less and less. And then, you know, the years when she was in bed and that, you know, we lived in a 2-story condo and the bedroom was upstairs and the bathroom was next to the bedroom. And other than the once a month when we were able to get her out to go to an appointment, that was her world. And like I existed there, but like if I was downstairs, like that was just this weird space that like, yes, it's our home, but she doesn't exist down there. Yeah, so I think there's a lot, that's a great idea for a topic, is just kind of go through that arc, because then there were a few things along the way that kind of, there were these jumps where she started doing better. And yeah, I mean, she's driving again now after 10 years. And it's, yeah. Thank you for the idea. We'll put that in the queue for sure. Yeah.
Well, and that's interesting even with the podcast, because we started it, what, 5-6 years ago?
True.
And at the beginning, I mean, you know, when we would do our check-ins,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now you're like, oh yeah, we went out to dinner the other night. And I'm like, stop a second. You can't just say
Right.
casually, we went out to dinner. When we first started this, there's absolutely no way you could have gone
Right.
out for dinner. And so it's been fun, even in the amount of time we've known each other and been
Mm-hmm.
recording, to see the progression.
Yeah, we tried to do, what was it? Like during COVID, our town did a drive-through lighted parade. Like normally there's this lighted parade that everybody goes to in December, and they were setting it up so that they had all the floats and you could just drive by it. And I don't know, it was like 2 hours we spent in traffic in a town of 10,000 people trying to get to the start of it. And she's just like, I can't anymore. And so we just had to bail on that. And we talked about that on the podcast years ago. And it's been a lot.
It's been a lot. Well, and kind of like what Maya said about like, and we're just smiling and talking about, I mean, you're like, and then she was bedbound for 3.5 years. I mean, it's wild the things that we
That feel normalized amongst
yes,
caregivers.
that those
Yeah.
people in this room have gone through,
Mhm.
and that we just have to keep going. And so we're like, oh yeah, and then the other day when I called 911, oh yeah, when she was bedbound for 3.5 years, you know? So it's a good reminder that we can let it all out and break down and have this community and talk about it as well. Pam, did you have a question earlier, or is it the time passed?
Oh.
First of all, just, thank you for the opportunity to bring all these caregivers in this room today. It's been amazing. My first question is actually the opposite of Tony's. We know that there are a lot of high school kids, for example, and young adolescents who are now having to take care of their parents or their grandparents. So are there support groups available that cater to that population as well?
Mm-hmm. Again, I'll throw that to the room. Are there organizations that people know specifically? I mean, the things that we have, our support groups tend younger than I think a lot of other support groups, but not to teenagers. Mm-hmm. They're welcome, but it's not specifically for that. And so I'm wondering, are there other people who have found those resources? it's another unseen group. Yeah.
And my second question is for Justin as well.
Okay.
There's some research that suggests, at least from a cancer continuum standpoint, that when a caregiver's loved one goes into remission, that can often be at times of stress for the caregiver, because now their loved one's in remission and everyone's trying to adjust to the new normal, and perhaps some of those feelings on either side that have maybe been suppressed are now coming out. Can you speak to that if you're comfortable doing so? Like, have you found yourself in that situation now that you're kind of trying to get back to normal, whatever
Right.
that normal is?
Yeah,
now?
certainly. Coming out of it, what was difficult for me is, so on top of being a caregiver, I have been living with depression as well as anxiety for a long time. I think I've been deeply burned out several times, at least through the caregiving journey. And so coming out of it, seeing Sarah have more energy and to be in situations where it felt like I didn't have the energy that she had, and so she was wanting to go out and do more because she had not been able to do anything for 10 years. And the guilt I felt in part of me just wanting to stay home because I'm recovering from this long journey as well. And that was a real thing. And it's certainly, it's been a few years and that mostly is okay, but there's still definitely times where it's like, well, I'm just exhausted myself. And part of that has been as well getting to the point where it's comfortable to ask her to support me in my health or like my mental health, to where, when she was so sick, that didn't feel like something I could put on her to support me in that way. And there were times she was not like, she did not have the capacity and it wouldn't even have been an option. So that's been an adjustment as well. Yeah, and certainly there wasn't, until we started doing this podcast, I mean, that was when I kind of started processing everything. And that has certainly continued as we've gotten through that. But yeah, it was a surprising the amount of adjustment that it was for me to when she was back to quote unquote normal. Yeah.
Hi. My question's about sort of the choice of making your journey super public or keeping it private. Maybe you've had a podcast episode about this already, but I just found it interesting that, like Jessica was talking about, her mom was quite private herself, right? So she felt she had to keep it private. I don't want to speak for you, but it sounded like that. And then Allison and Sean just began like social media. I'm like, you guys are pretty public about, things it's going through, like down to the detail. And that's, my husband and I, when he was going through cancer, also chose to be very public. And now that he has different but kind of related health issues, like we almost are rethinking it, like, I don't know, maybe we want to keep this a little closer to home this time. So just wondering if you've talked about that, or, just sort of your reflections on the trade-offs of that choice.
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, I probably am somewhere in the middle on that, because until we started doing the podcast, we were not really public beyond family and friends as far as what was going on with Sarah. Certainly, like my coworkers had no idea what was going on. I'm not one who talked much at work, and like work was work, friends were friends. And so, yeah, in a lot of areas of my life, I was pretty private with it. And I know you, like, really have like stepped out and made it a thing. And so what was it that prompted that, I guess?
In the very beginning, we had like a Lots of Helping Hands page, and I don't remember when we sort of shifted into doing it more on social media, but I think the benefit for me, a couple benefits. One is that instead of making like phone call after phone call after phone call and updating people, it's just sort of like, there it is. You all know what's happening. As far as our mission goes, it's sort of like telling the world like, yo, this is hard and this is what it actually looks like. But the other thing is that we have built this community and people help us because they know what's going on. And so sort of like Jessica said, you know, a neighbor saw an ambulance at her house, so they brought her a coffee cake, right? This is sort of like people see on social media that we're going through things, and so then they're able to reach out and support, and when they don't know, they just assume you're fine. And so I think that's been a huge benefit, is just it sort of like lets other people into what we're going through, and so that I don't have to, you know, be as public about like banging down the doors of like, this is really hard, we need your help. They can sort of see it and stay up to date. And so that also I don't have to spend my days sort of talking about all those things. And Sean, I mean, I always say, is it okay if I send this picture? Is it okay if I, he's like, sure, yep, whatever. Because he's also the best.
Yeah. I think that's also just not to say that as a caregiver, you have to be super public about what you're
Totally.
going through so that you get help. Like that burden should not be on you for
Yes.
that to be the means that is required to be supported. And certainly that is not for everyone. You know, your
For sure.
person you're caring for has to be on board with that. And, you know, that absolutely needs to be a discussion as far as what each of you is comfortable, or if it's a, you know, if it's a parent, probably the siblings have to talk about, okay, what do we want to share publicly? But yeah, it's just, it is a, just a point to where you can see how the system of support is so broken that like sometimes you just have to be sharing it on social media in order to be supported. Like that's not how the system should be working.
Yeah. And for me, I'll say like it helps me feel less isolated, right? Because then there's people, some that I don't even know, who are reaching out and saying, thinking of you while you're in the hospital and all of that, and it can feel less isolating in that way.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely a individual decision. Yeah. Oh, we're out of time, but this really cute guy in the back row has a question. So, okay.
Hi, honey.
Go ahead. Hi. Sorry, it's all my family members asking questions. I did not pay
This is our big
them.
day as a family. we're taking over. I just wanted to say to Jane and to others from a patient perspective, for me, why I choose to be public with this. First of all, the language I have. It's been a lot harder for me to talk about it than it has been for me to write about it. I feel that writing has been this unique gift and outlet for me to really be creative about how I let what I'm experiencing flow through me and flow out of me. And the other reason, you know, is writing something and hearing like, you have my words. And I think you get that at the podcast comments, you get that in the online support groups, like you too have this story, and that connection is so instant and so deep that it makes me want to keep sharing, because I know that someone else out there is going through it and doesn't or may not have the words at this point to articulate it. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Justin and I will be at the social hour.
Yes.
And would love to answer any more questions, or like Andrea already gave us another podcast, idea, if you have ideas for us to cover in the future. But thank you for giving us this space to have this in-person conversation.
Yeah.
It was great I think we did okay. What
I
do you
hope
think?
so. Yeah. I
Yeah?
think
Yeah. Thank you.